What's up, lovely people? It's your girl Anim Awe here, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. This video today, we're going to be talking about how to better prepare for mental health evaluation. So I'm a licensed mental health therapist, a wellness enthusiast, and I also do immigration evaluations and assessments for the purpose of mental health. And so many of you who may find yourself, working with an attorney, because hopefully you're working with an attorney as it relates to immigration purposes, because they are the experts when it comes to that. You find yourself working with the attorney may have recommended that you get a mental health evaluation. You may run into somebody like me. So today I want to give you tips on how to prepare for the mental health evaluation and just give you some tips. And I do want to give a couple disclaimers. Number one, I'm not a licensed attorney. This is not legal advice. And number two, the mental health evaluation doesn't necessarily guarantee that your case will automatically be approved. And so this is something that you want to talk about with your attorney first and foremost. So now that those disclaimers are out the way, let's jump right into it. So I think it's important for folks to understand the purpose of the evaluation, the mental health evaluation specifically. So the purpose of this evaluation is to speak to the impact of the perhaps mental anguish, physical abuse, or whatever the abuse or the trauma was. This evaluation, as a mental health professional, my job is to speak to the impacts that you have endured and the long-term sort of unfortunate impacts and ramifications that come as a result of you facing that hardship or that abuse or that manipulation or that verbal assault, whatever the claim is. And please understand that, when we hear abuse, we tend to think of it only from a physical standpoint. Abuse actually can range and look several different ways. And I also want to highlight that so that you don't minimize your experience, or you don't think that you would qualify, or you don't think that, or you think that you have to stay in that situation because it's not physical. Understand that physical abuse can also look like verbal abuse, right? Saying horrible things to you on a consistent basis, maybe saying degrading things about you, your culture, your ethnicity. That is verbal abuse. Also, manipulation, right? Taking advantage of you in very clear-cut ways. And so that can look like perhaps maybe taking money, maybe lying to you to get things out of you and on a consistent basis. These are things really that you want to make sure that you clarify with your attorney and, a part of your plan to get more clarity on that. So there's also emotional abuse, right? And so perhaps it looks like keeping you away from friends and families and loved ones, right? Purposely isolating you so that you cannot connect with other people or the people that you love. Maybe hiding your passport, maybe, throwing things in your face like, oh, if you say one more thing to me, I'm going to make sure I get you sent back to your country, right? So like not only is it a form of emotional, but it can also fall under manipulation as well. And there's also financial, right? There are instances where, you're here, maybe you're working, and you're now required to give 100% of your money to that person, and you never see a dime out of it, right? That could look like financial abuse, or the person stealing your money, or the person maybe blocked you out of your bank account. It can run the gamut. There's so many scenarios. So financial abuse is definitely a part of this. And also psychological, right? When we think about psychological abuse, it can also look a multitude of ways. But, one thing that's coming to mind in terms of psychological abuse is perhaps like, again, locking you away, like literally locking you away. Like there have been stories. There's nothing that I haven't heard at this point as a mental health professional, but that can definitely be a form of psychological abuse and torture. So please understand that abuse expands beyond just physical. And if you are, applying for Vawa or, hardship, asylum, these cases, these instances, those types of traumas are, definitely warrant those type of traumas could definitely be something that you could use for your case. But of course, you want to run that by your attorney first and foremost. So I just say all that to say that abuse looks a lot of different ways, and you should not be in a relationship just because it's not physical abuse, right? There are other types of forms of abuse that could qualify. So please keep that in mind, and also run it by your attorney. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of the assessment is to speak to the the impact of the abuse, right? So for many people who have been exposed to some levels of abuse or trauma, there will be long-term impacts, including high levels of anxiety. It could be depression. It could be, it could be a decrease in morale, right? And so it can look a lot of different ways. And so the point of the evaluation is to, for me as a professional or a colleague of mine, is to be able to speak to that. But also, I want to emphasize that it's not about judgment, right? I know a lot of people are coming in to see mental health evaluators, and you may be coming from other countries who don't value. I can't even truly say that Americans value mental health, but I will say we put a little more effort towards it than compared to some other countries. And so while it may be difficult to talk to a stranger, please understand that this isn't about judgment. This isn't about shaming. This isn't about making you feel bad. This is really supposed to be a safe space to kind of understand the magnitude of what you've experienced. A lot of you experience very difficult things, and again, that's why you come to this point where you hire the attorney and like you're applying for that particular designation or status. And so please understand this isn't about judgment, and like a therapist or mental health evaluators should be doing their job. And part of what they, when I say doing their job, is to ensure that this is a safe space where you feel comfortable about talking about things, right? And it isn't uncommon to have times like gaps in memories or difficulty recalling certain things, especially if you've experienced an intensive amount of trauma. And as trained professionals, we understand that, we recognize that, we know how trauma can impact the brain. And so a good trauma-informed mental health evaluator should understand that they shouldn't push you per se. And to that point, I want to kind of also speak to things perhaps that you could do as an individual who is preparing your case, if you will, or maybe you're finding yourself in a difficult situation right now. Like, one of the things that you could do is, like, if you've contacted the police in the case of domestic violence or whatever, make sure you hold on to those police reports. Not that I need to see it as a mental health evaluator to scrutinize it. That's not my goal. But holding on to that could help from, with your attorney. Also journaling, right? If things are happening on a consistent basis, maybe you're writing it down, just to kind of keep track of things. And again, working to sort of document what has happened and what you've experienced, or the magnitude that you've experienced, because it might be hard to recall later on. Also, I would recommend, like, if there are, if the abuse or manipulation is happening via text messaging and things like that, screenshotting those things, holding on to them. And again, we understand that abuse can be hard to recall sometimes. So sometimes just having that, I don't like to call it evidence because I'm not an attorney, but sometimes having that proof, if you will, to kind of just show the provider, just kind of understand the magnitude of what your experience was, can be really helpful. So don't discount the power in the proof, if you will, but also recognize that, a trauma-informed evaluator will understand that it's not always easy to recall certain items of the abuse or certain details of the abuse, and that is okay. We are trained to understand that and recognize that. We know what has happened, but just for your sake of your case, just having that information, maybe jotting things down and keeping that aside away from the abuser, might be helpful for you as well, long term. And also, I just want to recognize it's not always easy to call the police. It's not always easy to just run away. That's not always practical for a lot of people, especially when financial abuse is involved. So we completely understand that, which leads me to my next. Tracking your symptoms. So I talked about maybe tracking or keeping evidence, if you will, or the proof, if you will, but tracking your symptoms, right? And so again, this might be new terminology for a lot of you. We get that, like, health literacy looks different here in the United States versus, like, let's say Haiti, right? Because that's what I'm familiar with. And so maybe your way of tracking it is saying, like, if, 5 days a week, my heart was racing really fast, right? And so that could be speaking to the to a symptom of anxiety. Not always the case, but as we continue to evaluate and assess, we'll get more clarity on that. So also taking notes on specific incidents and the emotional impact that caused you, right? And so perhaps that could look like a journal entry on, like, today's July 2nd. at 1 o'clock we had an argument. My head is just hurting really bad. I can't sleep. I'm up all night. And so like, a journal entry like that can help you track your symptoms. It can actually help the therapist and the evaluator as well to kind of really speak to the diagnosis or speak to whatever the concern is. And also with that, when you are meeting with the evaluator should be implementing or giving you some sort of assessment tool to screen you. And by screen you, it just means like coming in at baseline, what is the experience around, right? And so typically I give three main screening tools, and this is nothing to be afraid of. Like when you go to the hospitals here in the United States, the doctors are generally giving you one or the other as well. So first one I do is GAD-7, which is the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7. So this is the questionnaire of 7 questions where it's assessing your experience with anxiety over the last 2 weeks. And so you're gonna fill that out, and based on the number it'll correlate to the level. So basically it's mild, moderate, and severe. And so I like to inform my clients where they're falling at or where they're coming in at. I also do the what do I do? So that I do PHQ-9, Patient Health Questionnaire 9. That's definitely one that primary care physicians use in their offices, and definitely an indication for them whether or not they're going to refer to behavioral health services or a mental health professional. And so that one assesses for depression. And so again, I'll look through it, you'll do it, and based on the range of scores, right, from 0 to like 11 is mild, I think it's 12 to like 16 is moderate, and 16 and up is severe. And so I'll have that conversation about what's going on. And again, that further speaks to the impact of like what's been going on regarding your mental health. And it kind of qualifies it and quantifies it as well. So that can be really helpful, and make sure that your provider or evaluator is using those tools to kind of help speak to the impacts of what you've experienced. And then finally, just a few things that I would recommend for folks going down this path of needing, a mental health evaluation, or maybe you have one upcoming, you're feeling a little nervous. Please understand that you have rights as a client, and your evaluator should go over that, whether in person or through the paperwork or through the initial consultation. Like, you have rights. You have rights to opt out. You have rights to not give full-on information if that's what you choose to, but you got to keep in mind again that our goal is to help you, right? And part of how we want to help you is speak to the magnitude of what you've experienced, and we can only do that if you are as truthful as possible. And see my previous video about the reasons why you should not be lying or making up information at this point, because that is not helpful. That will actually backfire in the long run. So see that video if you have any more questions. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions, right? And so from a mental health standpoint, again, because we're not attorneys, we can speak to we can answer questions around mental health, right? We can answer questions around like why certain things may be happening, or how symptoms are manifesting itself, whether it's through psychological response or somatization, right? You're experiencing it through your body. Like, we can talk about that, but we very rarely can say, or I would say we can't, and none of us, regardless of your level, whether you're a PhD, PsyD, LCSW, MFT, whatever, speak to the outcomes, because this report does not guarantee an outcome. It can certainly help your case, but it does not guarantee the outcome. So don't be afraid to ask questions, following up with your provider or your evaluator rather. And if there's information that you may have missed, maybe you felt so nervous that you felt like you couldn't remember or recall everything, don't be afraid to like set up a follow-up appointment with your provider, and kind of, be able to, say, hey, you know what, I was super anxious that first appointment. Now I'm gonna, I'm feeling a little better. Can we set up a follow-up appointment, have a little more information? That's totally fine. That's not unheard of rather. And so I say all this to say that you do have rights. It's not okay to be mistreated, abused of any sorts. And so as a mental health evaluator, our job is to speak to your case, speak to your experience, and speak to the magnitude, the mental health impacts of that experience. So we are here. We want to be an ally. And if you have any more questions about my services, let me know below in the comments, and make sure you share this with somebody that you know that might benefit from this. And I will see you soon, and take care of yourself. Bye.